Who are you?" The woman's trembling voice slipped through the barely open door, the old hinges creaking softly in the cold Chicago night. Standing in the dim hallway light was a man the entire city knew by name. Vincent Russo, a powerful mafia boss, the kind of man who could silence the most dangerous criminals with nothing more than a glance. But that night, in front of a rundown apartment door with the flickering hallway lights casting long shadows, he hadn't come to threaten anyone. And he hadn't come to collect a debt. He only said one sentence that made the woman collapse right there at the doorway. Because the name he mentioned was the name she had cried for every single night for the past 2 years. In that moment, neither of them realized that this fateful meeting between a broken, exhausted mother and the coldest mafia boss in the city would uncover secrets, mistakes, and a truth powerful enough to shatter everything they thought they knew. But the most unbelievable question of all was this: why would a man as powerful as Vincent Russo personally search for the woman who had disappeared from his son's life for 2 long years? If this story touched your heart, take a moment to reflect on the quiet power of kindness, especially when no one else chooses to show it. Share your thoughts in the comments and tell us where you're watching from. Which city and country are you in, and what time is it there right now? It's always amazing to see how stories like this connect people from all over the world. If moments like this remind you of the beauty of humanity, please like the video and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss more powerful stories that celebrate compassion, courage, and the simple acts of kindness that can change a life. October 2025, draped Chicago in a crisp, unforgiving autumn chill. The city lights flickered like distant promises along the north side's tree-lined streets, but in the shadowed outskirts, where wrought iron gates rose tall against the night, Vincent Russo's mansion stood apart, silent, fortified, a fortress of glass and stone that seemed to swallow sound. Inside its high-ceilinged halls, the air carried the faint scent of polished oak, an old leather undercut by something sharper, the metallic tang of regret that never quite left the rooms. Vincent Russo moved through his study like a man carrying invisible chains. At 48, he remained broad-shouldered and commanding, fair-skinned, with the kind of weathered handsomeness that came from years of decisions no one else could make. His dark hair was streaked with silver at the temples now, and his eyes, deep hazel, almost black in low light, held a quiet storm that few ever saw break. He had built an empire here, blending legitimate real estate holdings with the kind of influence that moved in whispers through City Hall and back alleys alike. Success had come at a price he still paid daily. He paused at the tall window overlooking the manicured lawn where security lights cast long, cold shadows. His limp was more pronounced tonight. The old bullet wound in his thigh ached when the temperature dropped, a reminder of the night 3 years earlier, when rival factions had ambushed his convoy on Lakeshore Drive. That same night had taken his wife Elena, not the housekeeper but the woman who had once laughed at his attempts to cook Sunday sauce. The loss had carved something permanent out of him, leaving guilt that gnawed like hunger he could never satisfy. He had failed to protect her. Now every choice felt like atonement he could never complete. In the East Wing, far from the study's heavy mahogany desk and the bank of monitors that glowed with live feeds, a small bedroom held the one light Vincent still allowed himself to hope for. Luca, his 10-year-old son, slept under a navy comforter embroidered with tiny stars. The boy's face, soft in repose, carried echoes of his mother, high cheekbones, the same wary hazel eyes that opened too quickly at any unfamiliar sound. Vincent had kept Luca hidden since the boy's mother passed from untreated illness 2 years prior, poverty finally claiming what hardship had started. Vincent had only learned of the child's existence months after her funeral, when a social worker's file landed on his desk like an accusation. He had brought Luca here immediately, quietly telling no one outside his inner circle. Protection, he called it. Isolation, the guilt whispered back. Vincent stepped into the room on silent feet, the carpet muffling his uneven gait. Luca's breathing was steady, but his small hands clutched the edge of the blanket as if bracing against dreams. Vincent stood there, a long moment, chest tight. He had installed the cameras himself, discreet lenses in corners, hallways, common areas, not out of mistrust for the boy, but because the world outside these walls had already proven it could take everything. Every night he checked the feeds from his phone, scrolling through grainy black and white scenes of empty corridors, the quiet kitchen, the boy's room. Control, he told himself. Safety. But the screens only showed what moved on the surface. They never reached the ache beneath. Tonight the guilt pressed harder. He thought of the boy's first weeks here, how Luca had flinched at sudden noises, how he ate slowly as if expecting the plate to vanish, how his thin frame still carried the hollows of too many skipped meals. Vincent had hired tutors, doctors, a nutritionist. He had filled the closet with new clothes, soft sweatshirts and jeans in sizes the boy had never owned. Yet Luca still woke sometimes, calling for a mother who would never answer, and Vincent had no words to fill that silence. He could command men, shift millions, silence threats with a glance, but he could not erase the years he had not known his son existed. Outside, the wind rattled dry leaves against the wrought iron fence. Vincent's phone buzzed softly on the nightstand, a message from his consigliere, Marco meeting set for tomorrow. Southside crew pushing boundaries again. They know something's changed with you. Vincent deleted it without reply. Change. The word tasted bitter. Since Luca arrived, something had shifted inside him, small cracks in the armor he had worn so long it felt like skin. He found himself lingering longer in doorways, watching the boy draw at the kitchen table or read under a lamp shaped like a baseball. Each moment carried a fragile warmth that terrified him. What if he failed again? What if his world reached in and took this one last piece of light? He turned away, limping back to the study. The monitors waited, their blue glow cold and constant. He sat heavily in the leather chair, fingers hovering over the keyboard. One feed showed the empty foyer. Another captured the driveway where 2 black SUVs idled, engines low. His men never slept. Neither did the fear. Across the city, miles from the mansion's quiet opulence, a different kind of night unfolded. In a crumbling apartment building on the south side, where streetlights flickered and died, Sarah Thompson huddled on a thin mattress pushed against a cracked wall. 28 years old, she looked older, cheek sunken skin, pale and drawn from months of hunger and sleepless cold. Her dark hair hung limp. Her hands, once soft, were rough and chapped. She wore the same faded hoodie and jeans she had for weeks, the fabric thin enough that the October wind sliced through like knives. The apartment had no heat. The landlord had cut it off after missed rent. She had sold everything sellable months ago. Her mother's old silver locket, the cheap microwave, even the winter coat she needed now. Sarah pulled her knees to her chest, trying to trap what little warmth remained. Her stomach twisted with sharp, familiar pain. She had not eaten since yesterday's half-loaf of discount bread. Sleep came in fragments interrupted by coughing fits and the rattle of trains passing too close. Tonight the wind howled louder, rattling the single-pane window patched with cardboard. She pressed her forehead to her knees, fighting the dizziness that rose in waves. How had it come to this? A factory job lost to layoffs, medical bills from a fall that left her unable to work for months, eviction notices ignored until the sheriff arrived. She had fought God how she had fought, but the city seemed determined to grind her down. In the corner, a small backpack held her only possessions, a change of underwear, a cracked phone with no data left, and a folded drawing Luca had made for her years ago, when he was still tiny before his mother took him away in shame. Sarah had not seen her son in 2 years. The memory stabbed deeper than the cold. She whispered his name into the dark voice breaking. Luca, I'm sorry. Tears came hot and silent. She wiped them away with shaking fingers, refusing to let despair win completely. Tomorrow she would try again, another shelter, another application, another plea. She had to. Unbeknownst to her, fate had already turned. Vincent's network, always listening, had picked up whispers, a woman matching the description from old records, living in squalor alone. The boy's mother, not dead as the file had claimed, misinformation planted perhaps deliberately. Vincent had stared at the grainy photo for hours, heart hammering with a violence he could not name. Guilt surged remorse like fire in his veins. He had believed she abandoned Luca. Now truth arrived like a blade she had been fighting to survive while he built walls around the son they both lost. He stood abruptly, ignoring the flare of pain in his leg. The decision formed instantly, fierce and unyielding. He would bring her here, not for himself, for Luca. For the boy who still woke crying for a mother he thought gone forever. Protection. Responsibility. The words echoed in his chest, drowning out doubt. Outside, the wind rose again, carrying the distant sound of sirens. Vincent reached for his coat, the heavy wool falling over shoulders that carried too much. Tonight the city would see movement, quiet, deliberate, unstoppable. A rescue already in motion, born not of romance but of a father's belated consuming need to make right what he had failed to protect. The monitors flickered on empty rooms, staring back. Vincent did not look at them. For the first time in years, he felt something sharper than fear, purpose edged with terror. He was going to bring her home. And whatever came after, rival threats, old wounds reopening, the raw shock of reunion, he would face it. For Luca, for the child who deserved more than shadows and screens. The night deepened. Chicago waited. The black Escalade cut through the south side streets just after midnight, headlights slicing the fog that rose from cracked pavement. Vincent Russo sat in the back coat collar turned up, eyes fixed on the passing blur of boarded storefronts and flickering neon signs advertising pawn shops that never closed. His driver, Tony, kept silent, knew better than to speak when the boss's jaw was set like iron. The air inside the vehicle smelled of leather and gun oil, expensive cologne, barely masking the metallic edge of tension. Vincent's phone rested face down on his thigh. The screen had gone dark after the last message from Marco. Target confirmed. Buildings clear except for her. No surveillance. You sure about this? He had not answered. He did not need to. The decision had already torn through him like shrapnel. Remorse and responsibility colliding so violently, he could feel the impact in his ribs every time he breathed. They slowed outside the sagging brick tenement on West 59th. Paint peeled in long strips. A single bulb dangled above the entrance, buzzing faintly. Vincent stepped out before the vehicle fully stopped. The cold bit instantly wind whipping off the lake and carrying the sour smell of garbage left too long on the curb. He moved with purpose despite the limp coat flapping open to reveal the dark wool suit beneath tailored, immaculate, absurdly out of place against the decay. Inside the stairwell, the stench thickened, mildew, stale urine, something faintly chemical. The steps creaked under his weight. He climbed to the 4th floor without pausing, breath steady even as guilt clawed deeper. At apartment 412 he stopped. The door was thin particle board paint flaking eviction notice taped crookedly at eye level, red ink screaming final warning in block letters. Vincent raised his fist, hesitated. Then knocked 3 firm measured raps. Silence, then a soft shuffle inside. The chain rattled. The door opened 4 inches. Sarah Thompson stood in the gap, eyes wide and glassy with exhaustion. She was smaller than the photos, thinner, almost fragile. Her hoodie hung loose on narrow shoulders. The sleeves swallowed her hands. Dark circles carved hollows beneath her eyes. Her lips were chapped, cracked from cold and dehydration. For a heartbeat, she simply stared, confusion clouding her features like smoke. Vincent spoke first, voice low, careful. Sarah Thompson. Her hand tightened on the doorframe. Who are you, Vincent Russo? He let the name sit between them a moment. I need to speak with you. About Luca. The name struck like a slap. Her knees buckled slightly. She caught herself on the jam. Color drained from her already pale face. Luca, the word came out small, cracked. Is he okay? He's safe. Vincent kept his tone, even though inside something roared, fierce protectiveness mixed with shame so thick it choked him. He's with me. He's been with me for months. Her eyes searched his face, frantic, disbelieving. You're lying. They told me he was gone. They said the father took him and disappeared. Tears welled fast and hot. She blinked them back violently. Why would you have him? Because he's my son. The admission burned, coming out raw, unfiltered. And yours? Sarah swayed. One hand flew to her mouth. The other gripped the door so hard her knuckles blanched. Dizziness hit her in a wave. She felt the floor tilt, the hallway narrow. She had not eaten in 36 hours. Sleep had been a series of shallow, shivering naps, interrupted by coughing, and the howl of wind through broken window seals. Now the world spun faster. No, she whispered. No, that can't. I would have known. I would have fought. You did fight. Vincent's voice dropped softer, almost gentle. I read the reports. The shelters. The clinics. The nights you slept in the car with him before they took him into care. I know what you carried. She shook her head, tears spilling now. Then why didn't you come sooner? Why did you let them think I gave him up? Her voice rose thin and trembling, then broke. Do you know what it feels like to wake up every day knowing your child thinks you abandoned him? Vincent felt the words like punches to the sternum. Remorse surged, violent, consuming. He had believed the forged documents, the convenient lie that she had walked away. He had hated her for it. And all the while she had been here, starving, freezing, breaking herself against a city that gave nothing back. I was wrong, he said quietly. I believed what I was told. I should have looked harder. I should have known. Sarah laughed once, a short, bitter sound that dissolved into a sob. She slid down the doorframe until she sat on the filthy hallway, carpet knees drawn up, arms wrapped around herself. I can't do this again. I can't hope and then lose him again. Vincent crouched, slowly ignoring the stab in his thigh. He stayed an arm's length away, respectful distance. I'm not here to take anything from you. I'm here to bring you to him. Her head jerked up. What he needs you. He still calls for you in his sleep. Every night. Vincent's throat tightened. And I can't be what he needs. Not alone. Sarah stared at him, shock giving way to something wilder hope so sharp it hurt. You're serious. I've never been more serious in my life. She searched his face again, looking for the lie, the trap. Finding none, she began to tremble, full-body shudders that had nothing to do with cold. I don't have anything. No clothes, no money, nothing clean. I smell like the street. I can't go to him like this. Vincent reached into his coat, withdrew a soft cashmere scarf, deep charcoal, impossibly warm. He held it out. Start with this. She stared at the fabric as if it might burn her. Then slowly, fingers shaking, she took it. The moment it touched her skin, she closed her eyes, pressing it to her cheek. A quiet, broken sound escaped her, half sob, half relief. Vincent stood. There's a car outside. Warm. Food inside. You don't have to decide everything tonight. Just come with me. See him. The rest we figure out together." Sarah rose unsteadily. She glanced back into the apartment, bare mattress, cardboard window patch, the single bulb flickering overhead. Everything she owned fit in one backpack. Humiliation burned fresh, the realization of how far she had fallen, how pitiful she must look to this man who wore wealth like armor. Yet beneath the shame flickered something new, curiosity edged with desperate trust. She stepped into the hallway. "If you're lying to me, I'm not." She nodded, once small and resolute. "Okay." They descended the stairs in silence. Outside the Escalade waited, exhaust curling white in the cold. Tony opened the rear door. Sarah hesitated, then climbed in. The leather seat was heated. The sudden warmth made her gasp. A paper bag sat on the console, still warm chicken noodle soup, from a 24-hour diner, a bottle of water, a chocolate bar. Simple things. To her they felt like miracles. Vincent slid in beside her, careful to leave space. As the car pulled away from the curb, he glanced at her profile, hollow cheeks, trembling hands clutching the scarf. Inside him, the conflict raged fiercer than ever, guilt for the years lost, fierce protectiveness for the woman who had carried his child through hell, and a sudden, overwhelming need to shield her from any further harm. It was not romance. It was something deeper, more primal responsibility, laced with remorse so intense it felt like love born of atonement. 2 blocks later, a black sedan pulled alongside windows, tinted engine growling. Tony's eyes flicked to the mirror. "Boss." Vincent's hand moved instinctively to the concealed holster beneath his coat. "Keep driving." The sedan accelerated, cut them off at the next intersection. 3 men stepped out, Southside crew faces known to Vincent from too many tense sit-downs. The leader, a wiry man named Reyes, leaned against the hood, arms crossed. Vincent lowered his window halfway. "Not tonight, Reyes." Reyes smirked. "Heard you're collecting strays now. Makes a man look weak." Vincent's voice stayed calm, lethal. "Move the car, or I move it for you." Tension crackled, silent, electric. Reyes held his gaze a beat longer, then signaled. The sedan reversed tires, hissing on wet asphalt. They disappeared into the fog. Sarah had shrunk against the door breath, shallow eyes, huge. Who were they? People who don't like change. Vincent turned to her, softening. "You're safe. I promise." She nodded, but the fear lingered, mixed now with awe. This man, powerful enough to make armed men back down with words, had come for her, had brought soup, had spoken her son's name like it was sacred. The car merged onto Lakeshore Drive, city lights streaking past. Sarah pressed her forehead to the cool window scarf, still clutched tight. Inside her chest, something cracked open, years of loneliness, shame, cold nights giving way to a fragile, burning trust. She did not understand it yet. She only knew that for the first time in forever, the weight on her shoulders felt lighter. Vincent watched her reflection in the glass. Remorse twisted sharper. He had failed her once. He would not fail again. The mansion waited ahead, gates opening silently, lights blooming warm against the dark. Inside waited a boy who still believed his mother had left him, and tonight she was coming home. The mansion's east wing hallway stretched long and hushed under soft, recessed lighting, the kind that never fully chased away shadows. Sarah Thompson stepped across the threshold for the first time just before dawn, October 2025, still clinging to the night outside. Her sneakers, worn soles, peeling laces frayed, made faint squeaks against marble that gleamed like polished ice. She stopped short in the foyer, breath-catching. The air smelled of clean linen, faint citrus from a diffuser somewhere unseen, and something warmer, fresh coffee brewing far down the corridor. The contrast struck her like a physical blow. For so long her world had been mildew and exhaust fumes. Now warmth wrapped around her like an unfamiliar embrace. Vincent walked ahead, pace deliberate to accommodate his limp and to give her space. He did not touch her, did not offer an arm. He simply led coat shed now sleeves of his white dress shirt rolled to the elbows. The shirt alone probably cost more than every piece of clothing she had ever owned combined. She clutched the cashmere scarf tighter, as if it might vanish if she loosened her grip. Luca's bedroom door stood ajar at the end of the hall. A nightlight shaped like a crescent moon spilled pale blue across the carpet. Vincent paused outside, hand on the frame. "He's still asleep," he murmured. "I didn't want to wake him yet. Thought you might want to see him first, just to know he's real." Sarah's throat closed. She nodded once, small and trembling. Vincent stepped aside. She moved forward on numb legs. The dizziness returned in soft waves, malnutrition, exhaustion, the surreal weight of the last hour pressing down. She reached the doorway and looked in. Luca lay curled on his side, small fist tucked under his cheek, his dark hair spilled across the pillow. One arm dangled off the mattress, fingers loose. The navy comforter rose and fell in slow rhythm. He looked taller than she remembered, yet still so fragile, cheeks fuller now, no longer sunken from hunger, but the same worried crease between his brows, even in sleep. A sound escaped her, half sob, half exhale. She pressed the scarf to her mouth to muffle it. Tears came fast, silent burning tracks down her cheeks. She had dreamed this moment so many times, waking each time to cold sheets and the howl of wind through cracked windows. Now it was real, and the reality tore at her joy so sharp it hurt, guilt so deep it drowned her. Vincent watched from the doorway. His chest ached with something fiercer than remorse, something possessive and protective and utterly consuming. He had never felt this before, the violent need to shield not just the boy, but the woman who had carried him through hell. It was not romantic. It was elemental. Fatherhood extended backward, claiming her too. He wanted to erase every night she had shivered alone, every meal she had skipped, every eviction notice that had stripped another layer of dignity. The urge burned so hot it frightened him. Sarah stepped closer. Her hand hovered above Luca's hair, trembling. She did not dare touch him, yet afraid he might wake and recoil, afraid this was still a dream that would shatter. Instead, she whispered so soft it barely carried, "My baby." Luca stirred. His eyes fluttered open, hazel like Vincent's, like hers. For a heartbeat, confusion clouded them. Then recognition hit. His small body jerked upright. "Mom," the word cracked the air. Sarah dropped to her knees beside the bed, arms opening instinctively. Luca launched forward, crashing into her chest. She wrapped around him, rocking, sobbing into his hair. "I'm here. I'm here. I never left you. I never stopped looking." Vincent turned away, eyes stinging. He stepped into the hall, back against the wall, fighting the storm inside. Guilt roared louder now. How many nights had Luca cried for her, while Vincent told himself the boy was better off without the woman he thought had abandoned him? How many years had he wasted believing lies? The self-loathing twisted like a blade. Downstairs, the household slowly woke. Elena, the housekeeper Vincent had hired months earlier, moved quietly through the kitchen. She was a sturdy woman in her late 40s, Chicago-born, dark hair pulled into a neat bun. She had been the one to notice Luca's quiet smiles when she played old Motown records, while folding laundry the way he relaxed, when she asked about his drawings instead of barking orders. She brought her 9-year-old daughter Sophia on afternoons when school let out early. The two children had bonded instantly over crayons and whispered secrets. Elena glanced up as Vincent descended the stairs. She read his face in an instant. "She's here," he nodded once. "Upstairs. With Luca." Elena's eyes softened. "Good. The boy's been carrying that hole in his chest too long." Vincent did not answer. He moved to the bank of windows overlooking the lawn. Outside, 2 of his men patrolled the perimeter, dark coats, earpieces, rifles slung low but visible. The sight grounded him, reminded him of the world he still ruled. Yet that world felt distant now, almost irrelevant. Mid-morning sunlight flooded the breakfast room. Sarah sat at the long oak table, Luca pressed to her side. She had showered. Vincent had shown her to a guest suite with towels softer than anything she had ever touched, shampoo that smelled of lavender instead of cheap motel soap. She wore borrowed clothes, soft gray sweatpants, and a long-sleeved cotton shirt from Elena's spare drawer. They hung loose on her thin frame, but they were clean, warm. Elena set a plate in front of her, scrambled eggs toast with butter, fresh strawberries. Sarah stared at the food as if it might disappear. Her hands shook when she lifted the fork. Luca watched her anxiously. "You okay, Mom?" She forced a smile. "Just not used to this much." Her voice stayed soft, timid. Years of speaking to landlords and caseworkers had taught her to keep it small. Vincent stood at the doorway, arms crossed. He watched her eat slowly, carefully, as if afraid to take too much. Each bite seemed to cost her something, pride perhaps, or the habit of rationing. The disparity clawed at him, his table groaning under abundance, while she had spent years choosing between heat and food. Elena's daughter Sophia slipped in quietly, backpack slung over one shoulder. She froze when she saw Sarah. "Luca is this?" Luca nodded proudly. "My mom." Sophia's eyes widened. She approached slowly, curious but guarded. "Hi, I'm Sophia. Luca talks about you all the time." Sarah looked up, startled by the child's directness. "He does all the time," Sophia said. "He said you make the best pancakes. And you sing when you're happy." Sarah's lip trembled. "I used to." Vincent felt the shift inside him, deepen an attachment so fierce it bordered on pain. He wanted to give her everything, safety, warmth, the dignity that had been stripped away night after night in that freezing apartment. He wanted Luca to have his mother whole again, and selfishly, quietly, he wanted to be the one who made it possible. Outside tires crunched on gravel. Vincent's phone buzzed Marco. He stepped onto the terrace. 2 cars had pulled up at the gate, black sedans, windows tinted. The same crew from the night before. Reyes stepped out, hands visible, posture relaxed, but eyes hard. Vincent met them at the gate. "You're on private property." Reyes smiled thinly. "Just checking in." "Word travels. You brought in a new face. Makes people nervous." Vincent's voice stayed low. "Lethal. She's not your concern. Everything's our concern when it changes the balance." Reyes glanced toward the house. "You going soft, Russo. Family makes a man vulnerable." Vincent stepped closer. "Walk away. Last warning." Tension hung thick. Reyes held his gaze, then backed off, slow, deliberate. The cars reversed, but Vincent knew it was not over. Threats lingered like smoke. Back inside, Sarah had moved to the living room couch. Luca curled against her head on her shoulder. She stroked his hair absently, eyes distant. The warmth, the safety, it overwhelmed her. She felt dizzy again, not from hunger now, but from the sheer force of it all. Trust bloomed in her chest, sudden and burning. This man, this powerful scarred stranger, had crossed the city in the dead of night to pull her from the dark. He had not asked for anything. He had only given. She looked up as Vincent re-entered. Their eyes met. In that quiet moment, something unspoken passed between them, gratitude on her side, fierce responsibility on his. No words, just stillness. Outside, the wind rose again, rattling leaves against the windows. Inside, bonds began to form, quiet, steady, unbreakable. And somewhere deeper in the places Vincent kept locked away, the conflict raged on remorse for the past, terror for the future, and a protective love so intense it felt like fire in his veins. Afternoon light slanted through the tall windows of the mansion's library, turning dust motes into tiny sparks above the Persian rug. Sarah sat in a deep armchair upholstered in soft charcoal velvet knees, drawn up beneath one of Vincent's oversized cashmere throws. The fabric felt impossibly luxurious against her still bruised skin. She kept smoothing it absently, as though afraid it might disappear if she stopped touching it. Across from her, Luca knelt on the floor with a sketchpad tongue between his teeth as he shaded the curve of a spaceship. Every few minutes he glanced up at her quick, hungry looks as if confirming she had not vanished while he wasn't watching. Sarah offered him a small, trembling smile each time. Inside, her heart hammered unevenly. The room smelled of old books, polished wood, and the faint vanilla from a candle Elena had lit earlier. Such ordinary comforts felt stolen, illicit. She had spent so many nights curled on cardboard under highway overpasses, wind cutting through thin layers until her bones ached, that this quiet felt like a betrayal of everything she had endured. Gratitude and shame warred fiercely in her chest, gratitude for the warmth, shame that she needed it so desperately. Vincent stood at the far end near the fireplace, pretending to study a leather-bound volume he had pulled at random. His back was to them, but every sense tracked their small movements, the scratch of Luca's pencil, Sarah's soft exhale, when she shifted the way her fingers tightened on the throw, whenever Luca laughed at something he had drawn. Vincent's thumb pressed hard against the book's spine until the leather creaked. Suspicion, old, familiar, useful, had begun to coil again in his gut. He had watched her on the cameras that morning, not obsessively, not yet just long enough to see her, hesitate before eating the second helping Elena offered, long enough to notice how she folded the napkin precisely as though saving it for later. Habits of scarcity. Habits he recognized from men who had grown up with nothing and never quite believed abundance was permanent. But recognition did not quiet the voice that whispered, what if she wants something more? What if this reunion is leverage? What if she tells someone where Luca is? The thought made him sick. He hated it, hated himself for thinking it. Yet the life he had built demanded suspicion. It had kept him alive through ambushes, betrayals, deals gone sour. Now that same instinct turned inward, tearing at the fragile new thing growing between them, responsibility edged with something fiercer, something that felt dangerously close to devotion. He wanted to protect her not just from the streets, but from the parts of himself that still saw threats in every shadow. Elena entered quietly, with a tray herbal tea for Sarah, hot chocolate for Luca, black coffee for Vincent. She set it down without comment, but her eyes met Vincent's for a brief second, knowing steady. She had seen the footage too. She knew what the cameras captured. She also knew the boy needed his mother more than Vincent needed control. Sarah accepted the mug with both hands. Steam rose against her face, loosening the tension in her jaw. "Thank you," she murmured to Elena, voice so soft it barely carried. Polite, timid, the tone of someone accustomed to being dismissed. Elena nodded once. "You're welcome, honey. Let me know if you need anything else." She left as silently as she had come. Luca slurped his chocolate, leaving a dark mustache. "Mom, you gotta try this. It's the best." He pushed the mug toward her. Sarah hesitated. "I'm okay, sweetheart. You drink it." Luca's face fell. "But Elena made extra for you." Vincent turned, then book closing with a soft thud. "She's right, Luca. Let her decide." His tone was gentle, but the undercurrent carried weight. Sarah looked up at him, quick-guarded. Curiosity flickered in her eyes, mixed with the old wariness. "You don't have to watch me like that," she said quietly. "I'm not going to steal anything." The words landed like a slap. Vincent felt heat rise in his throat, shame, not anger. "I'm not watching for that." "Then why the cameras?" Her voice stayed low, but the question cut clean. "I saw the little red lights in the corners. Upstairs, down here, everywhere." Luca froze chocolate forgotten. Vincent crossed the room slowly, limping more noticeably now that adrenaline had ebbed. He stopped a respectful distance away. "They're for safety. Not just yours. His." He nodded toward Luca. "My world. It doesn't forgive mistakes. People have tried to use him before. As leverage. As bait." Sarah's hands tightened around the mug until her knuckles whitened. "And you think I would?" "No." The denial came fast, instinctive, but the doubt lingered in his silence afterward. She set the mug down carefully. "I spent 2 years sleeping on benches, eating out of trash cans when the shelters were full because I wouldn't sign papers that said I was unfit. I walked miles in snow with holes in my shoes so I could stand outside the foster office and beg to see my own child." "Do you really believe I'd hurt him now?" Vincent's jaw worked. Remorse surged so violently he almost staggered. "I don't believe that," he said roughly, "but I've been wrong before. And the cost." He trailed off eyes on Luca, who watched them both with wide, frightened eyes. Sarah stood. The throw slipped to the floor. She was shaking not from cold now, but from the sudden, dizzying rush of emotion, hurt fury, desperate need to be believed. "You brought me here. You said he needed me. And now you're afraid of me," Vincent met her gaze. "I'm afraid of losing him again. I'm afraid of losing you both." The admission hung between them, raw, unguarded. Sarah blinked shock, softening the edges of her anger. No one had ever spoken to her that way, not with possession, but with vulnerability. Outside gravel crunched under tires. Vincent's head snapped toward the window. 2 dark SUVs idled at the gate, same crew, different day. Reyes leaned against the lead vehicle, arms crossed, staring directly at the house. Vincent moved before thought caught up. "Stay here. To Luca, with your mom. Don't move." He strode out, coat snatched from the hall tree. The front door closed behind him with a heavy click. Sarah pulled Luca against her side on the couch. Through the window, she watched Vincent approach the gate, shoulders square, limp, barely noticeable now under the force of his stride. Reyes straightened as Vincent neared. Words were exchanged, low, tense. Sarah could not hear them, but she saw the shift, Reyes gesturing sharply, Vincent responding with a single cold shake of his head. The other men in the SUVs tensed hands near jackets. Then Vincent stepped closer, close enough that Reyes had to tilt his head back. Whatever Vincent said made Reyes flinch, then retreat. Engines revved. The SUVs pulled away. Vincent stood motionless until they disappeared around the bend. Only then did his shoulders drop. He turned back toward the house, face carved from stone. When he re-entered the library, Sarah was still holding Luca. The boy's arms were tight around her waist. Vincent stopped in the doorway. "They're gone." Sarah nodded slowly. "You didn't have to do that alone." "I did." His voice was rough. "That's how it works." She studied him, really looked. The silver at his temples, the faint scar along his jaw, the way his hands flexed as though still ready for a fight. Power radiated from him, yes, but so did exhaustion. Deep bone-level weariness. "You don't trust easily," she said quietly. "Neither do you." A small, sad smile touched her lips. "Guess we have that in common." Luca looked between them. "Are you mad at each other?" Vincent crouched to Luca's level. "No, kid. Just figuring things out." Sarah reached out hesitant, then rested her hand on Vincent's forearm. The touch was light, almost nothing, but it burned through him like contact after years in the dark. "Thank you," she whispered. "For going out there. For keeping us safe." Vincent covered her hand with his own briefly, carefully. Always. The moment stretched quiet, condensed, fragile. Outside wind rattled the windows again. Inside suspicion lingered, but something stronger began to rise beneath it. Trust, tentative and burning, taking root against every instinct that screamed to pull back. Vincent stood. "I need to make a call. Elena will stay with you." Sarah nodded. As he left the room, she pulled Luca closer, cheek against his hair. Her heart still raced from fear, from hope, from the dizzying realization that someone powerful had chosen to stand between her and the world that had tried to break her. And in the hallway, Vincent leaned against the wall, eyes closed, fighting the violent churn inside, remorse for doubting her terror of what might still come, and a fierce, protective attachment that refused to be silenced. The cameras watched on silent witnesses to a bond growing sharper, deeper, more dangerous with every passing hour. Rain lashed the tall windows of the mansion's conservatory in steady, relentless sheets. October 2025 had turned suddenly bitter. Thunder rolled low over Lake Michigan, shaking the glass panes like distant artillery. Inside the room glowed warm string lights draped across potted ferns and orchids, a small gas fireplace crackling softly. The scent of damp earth mixed with Elena's chamomile tea steeping on a low table. It should have felt safe. Instead, the storm outside seemed to have seeped into the walls, pressing against every quiet corner. Sarah sat on the wide cushioned bench beneath the tallest window, knees drawn up, one of Luca's old sketchbooks open across her lap. She had not drawn in years, her hands too unsteady from cold and hunger, but tonight Luca had pressed the pencil into her palm with such earnest hope that she could not refuse. She traced slow, careful lines, a simple house with smoke curling from the chimney, two stick figures holding hands. Luca watched from the floor, chin on his knees, Sophia beside him sorting colored pencils into neat rows. The thunder cracked louder. Luca flinched. His small shoulders hunched. His breath came quick and shallow. Sarah noticed instantly. She set the pencil down. "Sweetheart." He shook his head, eyes fixed on the dark beyond the glass. "It sounds like that night." Sarah's heart lurched. She knew exactly which night he meant, the night the police had come. Sirens screaming, lights flashing blue and red through the cracked blinds of their tiny apartment. The night caseworkers had taken him while she begged on her knees, rain soaking through her thin sweater voice, hoarse from shouting his name, until they drove away. She had not seen him again for 2 years. She slid to the floor beside him, arms opening. "Come here." Luca crawled into her lap without hesitation, face buried against her shoulder. His body trembled, not from cold, but from memory. Sophia watched wide-eyed, then scooted closer until her shoulder touched Luca's back. The three of them formed a small, fragile circle on the thick rug. Sarah rocked him gently. "It's just thunder, baby. It can't get in here." But Luca's breathing only grew more ragged. I thought you weren't coming back. I kept waiting at the window, every day, and then they said you didn't want me anymore." The words landed like broken glass. Sarah froze. Tears welled so fast they blurred her vision. No, Luca, that's not true. I fought every single day. I walked to that office in blizzards with no coat. I slept on benches so I could be close enough to see the building where they kept you. I never stopped wanting you." Luca lifted his head. Tears streaked his cheeks. "Then why didn't they let you see me? Because the world isn't fair," she whispered. "It never has been for people like us." Sophia's small voice broke in, quiet but steady. "My mom says the same thing. We got kicked out of our apartment last winter. The landlord said we owed too much. We stayed in the car for 3 weeks. It was so cold the windows froze on the inside. I kept drawing pictures on the fog so Luca wouldn't be scared if he ever came to find us." Sarah looked at the girl, really looked. Sophia's dark eyes held shadows too old for 9 years. The same hollows under the cheeks that Sarah still carried, the same guarded hope. Thunder boomed again. Luca whimpered. Sarah pulled both children closer, one arm around each. "You're safe now," she said, though her own voice shook. "Both of you." From the arched doorway, Vincent watched unseen, motionless. He had come down the hall intending to check on them, but the scene stopped him cold. The three of them huddled together, small against the storm, sharing pain he had never fully understood until this moment. Guilt surged through him so violently, he had to brace one hand against the doorframe. He had kept Luca hidden, thinking isolation meant safety. He had doubted Sarah, thinking her presence might threaten that fragile bubble. And all the while, these children had carried wounds he could not see on any camera feed. He stepped into the room slowly. The movement drew their attention. Luca looked up first, relief flashing across his face. "Dad." The word hit Vincent like a fist to the sternum. Dad. Luca had started using it only days ago, tentative at first, then bolder. Each time it landed deeper, carving out space Vincent had long kept locked. Sarah met his eyes over Luca's head. Her expression held no accusation, only exhaustion and quiet plea. "He's having a hard night." Vincent crossed the rug and lowered himself to sit beside them, careful, awkward with his bad leg. He did not touch Sarah, but he rested one large hand on Luca's back, the other open on his own knee. "Tell me," he said softly. Luca sniffled. "I keep seeing it. The lights, the people taking me, Mom screaming." Vincent's throat closed. He had read the report's clinical detached pages that described removal and placement. They had never mentioned the screaming. They had never mentioned Sarah running barefoot after the car, in sleet, slipping, falling, rising again, until she could no longer keep up. "I'm sorry," Vincent said, rough, broken. "I should have found you sooner. I should have known." Sarah shook her head. "You didn't know I was still alive. They told you I was gone. That's no excuse." The silence that followed was thick, condensed. Rain drummed harder. Lightning flashed, illuminating their faces in stark white, 3 children and 1 man, all scarred by the same indifferent city. Sophia spoke again, voice small. My mom says sometimes bad things happen because people don't look close enough. Like when the shelter turned us away because we didn't have the right papers. They said we weren't priority, but we were freezing. Vincent looked at her, really looked. The same hunger in her eyes he had seen in Sarah's the night he brought her here. The same stubborn courage. Something cracked inside him, wide, painful. He had built walls to keep danger out, but those walls had also kept compassion at bay. He reached out slowly, palm up. Sophia hesitated, then placed her small hand in his. The trust was tentative but real. Sarah watched the gesture. Tears slipped down her cheeks again, silent, steady. She had spent years believing no one would ever see her children the way she did. Now this powerful broken man sat on the floor with them, holding space for their pain without trying to fix it. Another peal of thunder. Luca burrowed deeper into Sarah's arms. She began to hum soft, off-key, an old lullaby she used to sing when they lived in the single room with the leaking ceiling. Vincent listened, chest aching. He had never heard her sing before. The sound wrapped around him like warmth he did not deserve. Outside headlights swept the driveway. Vincent tensed. One of his men stepped into view, umbrella up, face grim. Vincent rose carefully. Stay here. He moved to the French doors, opened them just enough to speak. Rain blew in sideways. The man leaned close, Ray's crew circling again. 2 blocks out. They're testing the perimeter. Vincent's jaw tightened. Double the watch. No one gets near the house. The man nodded and disappeared into the dark. Vincent closed the doors, latched them. When he turned back, Sarah was watching him, eyes wide with sudden fear. Is it them again? Yes. He kept his voice calm. But they won't get inside. She swallowed. Because of you. Because of us. He gestured to the room, to Luca, to Sophia, to her. This is what they want to take. I won't let them. Sarah's breath hitched. Trust surged through her, fierce, overwhelming, almost painful in its intensity. This man, who could command fear with a glance, stood between her children and the world that had tried to destroy them. The realization dizzied her. She was no longer alone in the fight. Vincent returned to the rug. He sat closer this time, close enough that his shoulder brushed hers. No words, just presence. Luca reached out, took Vincent's hand, then Sarah's. Sophia completed the circle. 4 hands linked on the rug while thunder rolled on. In that quiet, condensed stillness, something shifted irreversibly. Vincent felt it in his bones, the suspicion that had gnawed at him beginning to dissolve under the weight of shared vulnerability. Remorse still burned hotter now because he understood the cost more clearly, but beneath it rose a fierce, protective love for all 3 of them. Not possession. Guardianship. Atonement made flesh. Sarah leaned her head against Luca's. Her voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper. Thank you. For letting me stay. Vincent's answer was rough, almost inaudible. Thank you. For coming back. The storm raged outside. Inside, bonds deepened, fragile, fierce, unbreakable. And in Vincent's chest, the conflict roared louder than any thunder guilt for the years, lost terror of threats still circling, and a burning need to protect this small, makeshift family he had never known he needed until they were here, holding his hands in the dark. The evening sky over Chicago had bruised to deep indigo by the time the first shots cracked the quiet. October 2025 was ending colder than most remembered. Frost already rimed the wrought iron fence around Vincent Russo's north side mansion. Inside the great room, firelight danced across walnut paneling and heavy velvet drapes. Sarah sat on the deep sofa with Luca curled against her side, Sophia tucked under her other arm. They had been reading aloud from an old hardcover of fairy tales Elena kept on the shelf. Soft voices, gentle turns of pages, the kind of ordinary peace Sarah had once believed impossible. The first gunshot sounded distant, muffled by thick walls and double-paned glass. Sarah's head snapped up. Luca stiffened. Sophia whispered, "Was that—" Vincent was already moving, coat half on phone pressed to his ear. His face had gone stone cold, the lines around his mouth carved deeper. "Stay down," he ordered, voice low and absolute. "All of you, behind the couch. Now." Sarah pulled the children with her heart slamming against her ribs. They crouched, low backs to the heavy leather. Luca's small hands clutched her hoodie. Sophia pressed her face to Sarah's shoulder, breathing fast. Outside, tires screeched on gravel. Engines roared closer. More shots, sharper now, closer. Glass shattered somewhere on the east wing. Vincent dropped to one knee beside them, Glock already in hand. He did not point it anywhere near the children. Instead, he cupped Luca's cheek with his free hand, brief, steady. "You're safe. I promise." Sarah met his eyes. Fear lived there, raw and bright, but so did something fiercer, resolve. She nodded once, small, trusting. The gesture nearly undid him. Marco burst through the side door, breathing hard. They breached the south gate. 6 men, maybe more. Reyes is leading. They want the kid or you. Probably both. Vincent's jaw tightened. Get the secondary team around back. Keep the perimeter locked. No one inside. Marco hesitated. Boss, you're still healing. Let us know. The word came out like a blade. Vincent rose. They don't touch my family. He moved toward the French doors leading to the terrace. Sarah reached out instinctively, fingers brushing his sleeve. Vincent. He paused, looked down at her hand on his arm. The touch burned through wool and skin straight to bone. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to that point of contact, her thin, trembling fingers against the dark fabric of his coat. Remorse surged again, violent and hot. He had brought this danger to her door, after pulling her from the streets. He had sworn to protect, and now the very world he ruled threatened to take everything. I'll be back, he said roughly. Then he was gone, sliding through the door into the night. Outside chaos unfolded in controlled bursts. Muzzle flashes lit the lawn like lightning. Vincent's men returned fire from cover, precise, disciplined. No wild spraying. Every shot counted. Vincent limped forward, using stone planters and low walls for cover. Pain flared in his thigh with every step, but he ignored it. His focus narrowed to the intruders advancing across the grass. Reyes emerged from the shadows near the fountain-black tactical vest rifle slung low. He raised both hands in mock surrender. Russo, we just want to talk. Vincent stepped into the open gun, steady. You brought an army to talk. Word is you're distracted. Soft. Family man now. Reyes's smile was thin, cruel. Makes you predictable. Vincent's voice carried across the lawn, calm and lethal. Walk away. Last chance. Reyes laughed once. Then he signaled. 2 men broke from cover, rushing the terrace doors. Inside, Sarah heard the renewed gunfire. Luca whimpered. She pulled both children tighter. Close your eyes, she whispered. Just listen to my voice. But the doors burst open, glass exploding inward. A man in dark gear stepped through, rifle raised. Sarah shoved the children behind her heart in her throat. She had nothing, no weapon, no strength, but instinct took over. She grabbed the heavy crystal vase from the side table and hurled it with all the force her malnourished body could muster. It struck the intruder's shoulder. He staggered. That second was enough. Vincent appeared in the doorway like a shadow given fury. He fired, once, clean, controlled. The man dropped, clutching his leg. Vincent crossed the room in 3 strides, kicking the rifle away, then turned to Sarah and the children. Are you hurt? Sarah shook her head, voice trembling. No, we're okay. Outside, the fight turned. Vincent's reinforcements arrived, black SUVs roaring up the drive, men spilling out. Reyes cursed, signaled retreat. Tires spun. Engines faded into the night. Silence fell, sudden ringing. Vincent lowered his weapon. Blood seeped through his shirt, fresh wound high on his side. He swayed once, caught himself on the doorframe. Sarah saw it. Horror flashed across her face. You're bleeding. It's nothing. It's not nothing. She stood on shaking legs, guiding the children to the far corner. Luca, Sophia, stay here. Don't move. She crossed to Vincent. Her hands still thin, still trembling, reached for his shirt. She peeled the fabric back gently. The bullet had grazed deep, tearing skin and muscle. Blood welled steadily. Vincent tried to pull away. I'll call the doctor. No time. Sarah's voice was soft but firm, the same tone she had used years ago when Luca had fever in their freezing apartment and she had no medicine but cool cloths and whispered promises. Sit. He obeyed more from shock than anything else. He sat heavily on the edge of the sofa. Sarah knelt between his knees, pressing the hem of her borrowed sweatshirt against the wound. Blood soaked through, instantly warm and sticky on her fingers. Vincent hissed through his teeth. Pain sharpened his focus, made every sensation vivid, her nearness, her careful touch, the faint lavender scent of the shampoo Elena had given her. Inside him the storm raged, fiercer guilt for endangering them, terror that he might fail again, and a fierce consuming need to keep her safe at any cost. This was no longer just responsibility. It was something deeper, more primal, a father's vow extended to the woman who had carried his child through hell. Sarah worked quietly torn fabric for pressure, another throw blanket wrapped tight. Her hands shook, but her movements stayed steady. Tears slipped down her cheeks, silent. You could have died, she whispered. For us. Vincent covered her hands with his large, scarred gentle. I would, every time. She looked up. Their eyes met close, unguarded. In that moment, something cracked wide open inside her, years of isolation, shame, cold nights on concrete, giving way to a trust so overwhelming it stole her breath. This man, powerful, dangerous, wealthy beyond anything she could imagine, had bled for her children, had chosen them over safety. The disparity struck her again, dizzying his world of marble and security against the nights she had spent shivering under cardboard wind, cutting through every layer until numbness set in. Yet here he sat bleeding because of her. Luca crept forward, eyes huge. Dad Vincent opened his free arm. Luca climbed onto the sofa, pressing against Vincent's uninjured side. Sophia followed, small hand resting on Vincent's knee. Sarah finished the makeshift bandage. She did not pull away. Instead, she leaned forward, forehead resting briefly against Vincent's shoulder, exhaustion, relief, gratitude crashing over her in waves. "Thank you," she breathed. "For protecting them." Vincent turned his face into her hair, brief, careful. "Thank you. For staying." The room fell quiet again. Fire crackled. Distant sirens wailed. Someone had called emergency services, despite Vincent's orders. Outside, his men secured the perimeter. Inside, 4 people sat together on blood-stained velvet, wounded, shaken but unbroken. Vincent closed his eyes. The inner tearing reached new depths, remorse for every year he had not known them, terror of how close he had come to losing them tonight, and a burning protective love that refused to be contained. He would dismantle his empire piece by piece if it meant keeping this fragile circle safe. Sarah lifted her head. Her voice was soft, almost reverent. "We're still here." Vincent nodded, once slow, certain. "We're still here." And in the stillness that followed, healing began, not with grand gestures, but with small, steady touches. A hand on a shoulder, a child's breath evening out, a woman's quiet strength holding everything together. The night deepened. Chicago waited beyond the walls. But inside, something unbreakable had taken root. The mansion's kitchen glowed under warm pendant lights the morning after the attack. October 2025. Still carrying the chill of the night's violence. Sunlight slanted through tall windows, catching motes of dust above the marble island where Elena moved with quiet efficiency. She wore a simple navy cardigan over a white blouse, sleeves pushed to her elbows, hair secured in a low knot. The scent of fresh coffee and cinnamon rolls rising in the oven filled the room, comforting ordinary things that felt almost defiant after the gunfire. Sarah sat at the far end of the island on a high stool, hands wrapped around a mug of chamomile tea. Elena had pressed into them without asking. The mug was heavy, porcelain, smooth and warm. Sarah kept turning it, slowly tracing the rim with one fingertip as though memorizing its solidity. Her borrowed sweater hung loose on her thin shoulders. The sleeves still carried faint traces of last night's blood. Vincent's blood darkened to rusty brown. She had not changed yet. Exhaustion etched deep lines around her eyes, but she refused to leave the kitchen until she knew Vincent was stable. Luca and Sophia were upstairs with one of Vincent's trusted men, reading comics in the media room, doors locked, soft music playing to drown out any lingering echoes of the night. Elena had insisted. Children needed distance from what adults carried. Vincent entered slowly, favoring his right side. Fresh bandages showed beneath his open shirt collar. The doctor had come and gone before dawn, stitching and prescribing rest Vincent had no intention of taking. His face was pale, jaw set against pain, but his eyes found Sarah immediately searching steady. She stood without thinking. "You should be lying down. I needed to see you." His voice was rough from lack of sleep and the raw edge of everything unsaid. Elena glanced between them, then quietly set a plate of cinnamon rolls on the island and stepped toward the pantry. "I'll give you a moment." She did not leave entirely, lingered near the open pantry door, back turned but ears attentive. She had seen too many nights like this in her years of nursing families fractured by violence, wounds deeper than skin. Vincent lowered himself onto a stool across from Sarah. The movement cost him. He exhaled sharply through his nose. Sarah reached out instinctively, then caught herself, hand hovering. "Does it hurt badly?" "Less than it should." He met her gaze. "You saved me last night. You didn't have to. I couldn't just watch." Her voice stayed soft, almost apologetic, as though saving a life required permission. Years of being told she was powerless had left that habit etched deep. Vincent studied her, really studied. The hollows under her cheekbones, the faint tremor in her fingers, the way she sat with shoulders slightly hunched as though expecting to be asked to leave. Remorse surged again, sharper now, laced with something fiercer awe. This woman who had once slept under bridges with newspapers for blankets, who had rationed half a granola bar for 2 days so her son could eat, had knelt in his blood and held pressure without hesitation. He spoke quietly. "I need to understand something." Sarah tensed. "What? Why you stayed? After everything. After I doubted you. After this," he gestured vaguely toward the bandaged wound. "You could have taken Luca and run. You didn't." Sarah looked down at her tea. Steam rose in thin curls. "I thought about it. In the dark last night, when the shooting stopped and everything was quiet, I thought I could grab the kids, slip out the side gate, disappear again. I know how. I've done it before." Vincent's chest tightened. The image of her running, thin coat flapping, children clinging to her hands, wind cutting through them, tore at him like claws. But then I looked at Luca, she continued, voice cracking. And Sophia, and you bleeding on the floor because you stood between us and them. I couldn't leave that. Not after someone finally saw us as worth protecting. Vincent swallowed hard. I should have seen it sooner. Elena emerged from the pantry, then carrying a small wooden box, old, worn at the corners, the kind that once held recipe cards or keepsakes. She set it gently on the island between them. Sarah looked up, confused. Elena, I've been quiet too long, Elena said simply. You both deserve to know why I'm here. Why I care so much. Vincent straightened slightly, pain forgotten for a moment. Elena had worked for him for over a year, reliable, discreet, kind to Luca in ways that had slowly thawed the boy's guarded heart. He had never asked about her past. He had assumed it was ordinary. Elena opened the box. Inside lay a slim leather journal, edges, frayed, pages yellowed. She lifted it carefully as though it might crumble. 10 years ago I was a pediatric nurse at County General. Long shifts, understaffed floors, kids who came in broken and left the same way if they were lucky. There was one boy, 14, gang-affiliated, paralyzed from a drive-by that was never solved. His name was Matteo. He had no family that claimed him. The system moved him from ward to ward because no one wanted the liability. I took care of him. Read to him. Played music when the nights got too quiet. He called me Tia. I started thinking of him as mine. Her voice stayed steady, but her fingers trembled on the journal. One winter, the funding got cut. Medicaid changes. The hospital needed beds for paying patients. They discharged him to a state facility that was more warehouse than care. I fought it, paperwork, appeals, calls to anyone who would listen. They told me I was overstepping. I was written up. Then Matteo got an infection. No one caught it in time. He died alone in a room with peeling paint and no one to hold his hand. Silence fell thick, heavy. Elena opened the journal to a marked page. A child's drawing was taped inside a stick-figure woman with a stethoscope, smiling, holding hands with a boy in a wheelchair. Below it, in careful block letters, to Tia Elena. You see me. I quit the next week, she said. I couldn't go back. But I made a promise to myself if I ever saw another child who felt invisible, I would not look away. Not again. She looked at Sarah first. When Luca came here, quiet, scared, carrying grief bigger than he was, I saw Matteo. And when you walked through that door, thin and shaking and still fighting to stand tall, I saw every mother the system chewed up and spit out, including me once. Sarah's tears fell freely now, silent, unstoppable. She reached across the island and covered Elena's hand with her own. You didn't fail him. You loved him. That matters. Elena's eyes glistened. It didn't save him. Vincent had not moved. His face was carved from grief, his own layered over hers. He understood failure. He had lived with it since the night his wife died in his arms on Lakeshore Drive. He had built walls to keep it out, but walls only trapped it inside. He spoke at last, voice low and rough. You stayed for them, even when it hurt. Elena nodded. I stayed because someone has to. And because you, she looked at Vincent, you're trying. You're bleeding for it. That's more than most do. Sarah withdrew her hand slowly. She looked at Vincent's eyes, searching, vulnerable. I thought I was the only one carrying ghosts. I was wrong. Vincent reached across the island, slow, deliberate, and took her hand. His palm was warm, calloused, steady. We all carry them. The difference is we don't have to carry them alone anymore. The moment stretched quiet, condensed, sacred. Outside wind rattled dry leaves against the windows. Inside, 3 adults sat around a kitchen island, scarred by years of meals and conversations, sharing pain that had once been born in silence. Elena closed the journal gently. I'll check on the kids. She left them alone. Sarah did not pull her hand away. Instead, she turned it palm up, lacing her fingers through Vincent's. The gesture was small, tentative, but it anchored her. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. Being safe, being seen. Vincent squeezed her hand, once gentle, certain. You don't have to know. Just stay. Tears slipped down her cheeks again. I will. Vincent felt the inner storm reach its peak, remorse for every night she had suffered alone, guilt for every doubt. He had harbored terror that the world outside might still reach in, and beneath it all, a fierce, burning attachment that refused to be named anything less than family. He would tear down his empire brick by brick if it meant keeping this promise. Sarah rested her forehead against their joined hands for a long moment, exhaustion, relief, gratitude crashing together. When she lifted her head, her voice was soft but steady. Thank you for letting Elena tell us, for listening. Vincent's answer was quiet, almost reverent. Thank you for trusting me enough to stay. The kitchen light caught the tears on her lashes, turned them to tiny prisms. Outside, the city moved on, cold, indifferent, unjust. Inside, healing deepened, one shared story, one held hand, one promise at a time. Late afternoon light filtered through the mansion's solarium in soft golden bands, October 2025, drawing toward its close with a deceptive calm. The glass walls and ceiling let the sun pour in unchecked, warming the tiled floor and the wicker furniture arranged in a loose circle around a low table scattered with sketch pads, colored pencils, and half-finished drawings. Potted ferns and trailing ivy softened the edges of the room, their green a quiet counterpoint to the city's gray beyond the panes. Sophia sat cross-legged on a thick floor cushion, dark hair falling forward as she bent over her latest drawing, a sprawling cityscape made of sharp angles and bright, defiant color. Luca worked beside her, tongue caught between his teeth, adding tiny stars to a night sky that stretched across 2 pages. Sarah watched from the cushioned bench nearby, knees drawn up, one of Vincent's soft wool throws draped over her shoulders. She had finally changed into fresh clothes that morning, simple cotton leggings and a long-sleeved tunic Elena had found in the guest closet. But the borrowed garments still felt borrowed like armor she had not yet earned the right to wear. Vincent stood at the threshold, one hand resting on the doorframe. He had spent the morning in his study with Marco, reviewing security footage and tightening protocols after the previous night's breach. His side ached under fresh bandages, a dull throb that matched the deeper ache in his chest. He had come looking for the children, for Sarah, for the small, steady proof that they were still here, still breathing. Sophia glanced up first. Her eyes wide, watchful, met his. For weeks she had kept her distance, polite nods, quiet thanks, but always a careful space between them. She had seen too many men with power use it like a weapon. She had learned early that kindness often hid a price. Yet last night she had watched Vincent bleed for them, had seen him stagger back into the house with his arm around Luca, face pale but eyes fierce. Something in her had shifted, small but irrevocable. She set her pencil down. "You're supposed to be resting." Vincent managed a faint, crooked smile. "I am resting. This is me resting." Luca looked up, grinning. "Dad," Sophia drew the house. "Come see." Vincent crossed the room slowly, easing himself onto the bench beside Sarah. Their shoulders brushed, accidental, then deliberate. She did not pull away. The contact grounded him, steadied the storm inside. Sophia hesitated, then turned the sketchpad toward him. The drawing showed the mansion from the front, tall gates, stone walls, windows glowing warm. But in the foreground stood 4 small figures, 2 adults, 2 children holding hands. One man had silver at his temples. One woman had long dark hair. The children were smaller, smiling. Vincent stared. His throat tightened. "That's us." Sophia nodded once, small, almost shy. "Yeah." Sarah leaned forward. "It's beautiful, Sophia." The girl looked at her shoes. "I didn't know if I should draw him." She nodded toward Vincent. "Because I wasn't sure." Vincent's heart lurched. Sure of what Sophia lifted her gaze direct, unflinching. "If you were good." "Luca said you were, but I've seen men be nice when they want something. My mom's ex was like that. He'd buy ice cream, then yell when the rent was late. I told Luca not to trust you. I said you looked scary, like the guys on the news who take things away." The admission hung in the air, quiet, devastating. Sarah's breath caught. She reached for Sophia's hand. The girl let her take it. Vincent did not flinch from the words. He deserved them. "You were right to be careful," he said softly. "I've done things that would scare most people. I've made choices I can't undo. But with you, with Luca, with your mom, with Sarah, I'm trying to be different. I don't want to take anything. I want to keep you safe." Sophia studied him for a long moment. Tears gathered in her lower lids, but did not fall. "Last night, you got shot. You could have run. You didn't. You stayed. For us." Vincent nodded once. "I stayed." She swallowed. "I thought you were gonna die. I was scared. Really scared. Not just for Luca. For you." The confession cracked something inside him wide open. Remorse surged, violent, consuming, mixed with a fierce, aching tenderness he had no name for. This child who had slept in a car with frost on the windows, who had learned too young that powerful men brought pain, had been afraid for him. Vincent leaned forward slowly. "I'm sorry I scared you before. I'm sorry the world taught you to expect the worst. But I promise I'm not going anywhere." Sophia's lip trembled. She looked at Luca, then at Sarah, then back at Vincent. Tears spilled over. "I'm sorry I didn't trust you." Vincent opened his arms, slow, careful. Sophia hesitated only a heartbeat before launching forward, wrapping her small arms around his neck. He held her gently, one hand cradling the back of her head, the other resting on her back. She buried her face against his shoulder and cried quiet, wrenching sobs that shook her whole frame. Sarah watched, tears streaming down her own cheeks. Luca scooted closer, pressing against Vincent's side. The four of them formed a small, trembling knot on the bench, children clinging, adults anchoring. Vincent felt the dam inside him break. Tears burned behind his eyes, hot, unfamiliar. He had not cried since his wife's funeral. He had locked that part of himself away with the guilt and the blood on his hands. Now it poured out remorse for every year he had lived armored against feeling terror that he might still lose this fragile family, and a love so overwhelming it felt like pain. Not romantic, paternal, fierce, absolute. He pressed his cheek to Sophia's hair. "You don't have to be sorry," he whispered. "You were protecting your friend. That's brave." Sophia pulled back just enough to look at him. Her face was streaked, eyes red. "You're not scary anymore." Vincent gave a choked laugh, half sob. "Good. Because I'm tired of being scary." Sarah reached across, brushing a tear from his cheek with her thumb. The touch was light, reverent. "None of us are alone in this," she said softly. Outside, a car engine idled at the gate, Marco checking in, no doubt. Vincent ignored it. The world could wait. Sophia wiped her eyes with her sleeve. Can I call you something, like Luca does?" Vincent's heart stuttered. "You can call me whatever feels right." She thought for a moment. "Uncle Vinny." The name landed soft and sure. Vincent closed his eyes briefly. "Uncle Vinny," he repeated, voice thick. "I like that." Luca grinned through his own tears. "See, told you he's good." Sophia laughed, a small, watery sound. She slid off Vincent's lap, but stayed close, leaning against his knee. She picked up her pencil again, added a few more stars to the sky above the house. Sarah rested her head on Vincent's shoulder, exhaustion and relief mingling in the simple gesture. He turned his face into her hair, breathing her in faint lavender warmth life. The attachment burned brighter, now passionate, protective, unyielding. He would raise the city if it meant keeping these three safe. In the quiet that followed, the solarium held them like a cocoon. Drawings lay scattered across the table, bright colors against white paper. Outside wind stirred the last leaves of autumn. Inside, trust took root deeper than doubt had ever reached. Vincent looked at the children, at Sophia's careful strokes, at Luca's contented smile, and felt the violent inner conflict finally ease not into peace exactly, but into purpose. He had failed so many times before. He would not fail them. Sarah lifted her head. Her voice was soft, almost wonderstruck. "We're okay." Vincent nodded, slow, certain. "We're okay." And in that condensed stillness, with sunlight warming their faces and small hands resting on his, something unbreakable settled into place. Family forged not by blood alone, but by choice, by survival, by the quiet courage to trust again. The city waited beyond the glass, cold, unjust, relentless. But here, in this room of green and gold, healing held. Dusk settled over Chicago like a heavy curtain, October 2025, bleeding into early evening with a wind that carried the sharp promise of winter. The mansion's study glowed with the muted amber of desk lamps and the blue flicker of multiple monitors. Vincent sat alone at the wide mahogany desk sleeves rolled to his elbows, the fresh bandage on his side hidden beneath a dark cashmere sweater. The room smelled faintly of leather-aged paper and the bitter edge of black coffee gone cold in a porcelain cup. On the largest screen, security feeds cycled in silent grid perimeter, gates, driveway, east lawn, the solarium where Sarah, Luca, and Sophia had spent the afternoon drawing together. Vincent watched the loop twice, searching for anomalies he already knew were not there. The house was locked down tighter than ever after the attack. Extra men on rotation, reinforced gates, motion sensors calibrated to a hair's breadth. Yet unease gnawed at him deeper than the bullet graze. His phone buzzed once Marco's name on the screen. Vincent answered without greeting. "Boss, you need to see this. Talk. Financials from the last quarter. Small discrepancies. Wire transfers routed through dummy accounts. Nothing huge enough to look like rounding errors. But they're consistent. Same pattern every month for the past year." Vincent's grip tightened on the phone. "Who has access?" "Only 3 people. You, me, and..." The name hung unspoken between them. Vincent ended the call. He stared at the blank wall opposite the desk, where a single framed photograph hung him and his late wife on a rare quiet day at the lake. Her head on his shoulder, both of them laughing. The image blurred as guilt surged, violent familiar now sharpened by fresh betrayal. He rose slowly, ignoring the pull of stitches, and walked the quiet halls to the east wing. Sarah was in the children's playroom with Luca and Sophia. They had spread blankets on the floor, building a fort from cushions and sheets. Laughter drifted out, small, bright sounds that pierced him like light through cracked armor. He paused in the doorway. Sarah looked up first. Her smile faltered when she saw his face. "Vincent." He stepped inside. "Can I speak with you alone?" She nodded, rising. She kissed Luca's forehead, ruffled Sophia's hair. "I'll be right back, okay? Stay in the fort." The children nodded solemnly. Vincent led Sarah down the corridor to a small sitting room lined with bookshelves and a single deep window overlooking the darkening lawn. He closed the door softly. Sarah wrapped her arms around herself. "What's wrong?" Vincent did not answer immediately. He crossed to the window, hands clasped behind his back. The city lights were beginning to come on, distant and different. "Someone close to me sold Luca's location to Reyes," he said at last. "The night of the attack wasn't random. They knew exactly when and where to hit." Sarah's breath caught, who Vincent turned. His eyes were dark, haunted. "Marco, my consigliere. The man who stood beside me for 15 years. The name landed like a stone in still water." Sarah swayed slightly, dizziness, rising fast, the same disorienting spin she had felt the night Vincent first appeared at her apartment door. She reached for the back of a chair to steady herself. He knew everything," she whispered. "He knew Luca was here. He knew I was here." Vincent nodded once. "He's been skimming funds for months, small enough to hide, large enough to buy loyalty from the Southside crew when the time came. He thought I was going soft. Thought family would make me weak. He wanted to force me back to the old ways or take what I built if I refused." Sarah's knees buckled. She sank into the chair. Tears came fast, hot, silent. "We could have died. The children could have." Vincent crossed the room in 2 strides and knelt before her, careful of his wound, careful of her. He took both her hands in his. They were cold, trembling. "I know," he said roughly. "I know." She looked at him, eyes wide with shock, confusion, horror. How could someone you trusted do this? After everything, Vincent's jaw worked. Remorse crashed through him in waves so violent he felt physically ill. "Because I let it happen. I built a world where loyalty is bought and fear is currency. I taught him that weakness is death. And when I started to change, when I started to care, he saw it as betrayal." Sarah shook her head. "That's not your fault." "It is." His voice cracked. "Every choice I made led here. Every night I chose power over people. Every time I told myself the ends justified the means. I kept Luca hidden because I thought it protected him. I doubted you because I thought it protected him. And all along the real danger was standing right beside me." Tears slipped down Sarah's cheeks. She squeezed his hands, hard, desperate. "But you changed. You're changing. You bled for us. You cried with Sophia. You let Elena tell her story. You're not that man anymore." Vincent bowed his head. Her words struck deeper than any bullet. "I want to believe that. God, I want to believe that." Outside, gravel crunched too many tires too fast. Vincent stiffened. He rose, pulling Sarah up with him. "Stay here." He moved to the door, cracked it open. Through the hallway window, he saw 3 black sedans rolling up the drive. No headlights, no markings. Men stepped out, armed, purposeful. Marco led them. Vincent closed the door. His face had gone calm, dangerously calm. "He's here." Sarah's breath hitched. "What do we do?" Vincent cupped her face gently, thumbs brushing away tears. "You take the children to the safe room. Elena knows where. Lock it. Don't open for anyone but me." She shook her head. "I can't leave you. You have to." His voice was low, fierce. "For them. For me." Sarah searched, his eyes terror and trust warring there. Then she nodded once, small, resolute. Vincent pressed a brief kiss to her forehead, protective, not possessive. "Go." She slipped out, hurrying down the hall toward the playroom. Vincent waited until he heard the soft click of the safe room door sealing. Then he walked out the front entrance alone, unarmed, coat open to show he carried nothing. Marco waited at the bottom of the steps, flanked by 4 men. The wind whipped his coat open. The pistol at his hip glinted under security lights. "Vinny," Marco said, almost gentle. "You didn't have to make this hard." Vincent stopped 3 steps above him. "You sold out a child. My son." Marco shrugged. "I sold out a liability. You were going to dismantle everything we built. For what? A woman who slept in alleys. 2 kids who'll drag you down." Vincent's hands flexed at his sides. "You don't get to decide what matters." Marco sighed. "I already did. Step aside. Let us take the boy. We'll make it clean. You walk away with the empire intact." Vincent laughed once short, bitter. "You think I'd let you touch him?" Marco drew his pistol slowly. "Then you die here." Vincent descended 1 step. "You forget something, Marco." Marco raised the gun. "What's that?" Vincent's voice dropped to a whisper carried on the wind. "I taught you everything you know." In a blur too fast to track, Vincent closed the distance. He disarmed Marco with a single practiced twist gun clattering to the gravel. The other men raised weapons, but Vincent's own security emerged from shadows, silent, overwhelming. Within seconds, the driveway was secured, men on their knees, Marco pinned against the hood of a sedan. Vincent stood over him, breathing hard stitches, pulling. "You were my brother," he said quietly. "And you chose this." Marco looked up, eyes defiant, then defeated. I chose survival. Vincent shook his head. You chose fear. He turned away. Take him. No one touches him until I decide. Marco was dragged toward the garage. Vincent stood motionless as the wind howled around him, alone on the steps, blood seeping fresh through his bandage, heart tearing itself apart with every beat. Inside, Sarah waited at the safe room door, children safe behind her. When Vincent appeared limping pale, she rushed forward. You're hurt again. He caught her hands. It's over. She searched his face. Is it he? Pulled her close, careful, reverent. For tonight. She rested her forehead against his chest. You didn't kill him. No. She exhaled, shaky relief. Thank you. Vincent closed his eyes. The conflict raged on remorse for trusting the wrong man, terror of how close betrayal had come, and a love so fierce it burned through every doubt. He would protect them, no matter the cost. Sarah lifted her head. We're still here, Vincent nodded, slow, certain. We're still here, and in the quiet that followed, with children sleeping safely, and the night pressing against the windows, trust deepened into something unbreakable, forged in betrayal, tempered in mercy, held together by the quiet courage to choose. Differently, night had fallen fully over the north side by the time Vincent returned from the garage where Marco had been secured, hands bound, eyes averted. The man who once called him brother, now reduced to silence and shadows. October 2025 pressed cold fingers against every window pane. Frost already etched delicate patterns on the glass. Inside the mansion, the air felt thick with aftermath, gun oil lingering faintly in hallways. The metallic tang of blood long cleaned but never quite erased. Vincent moved through the corridors like a man carrying fresh wounds no bandage could touch. His limp was more pronounced now. Each step pulled at the reopened graze along his ribs. He had refused the doctor's second visit. Pain was penance. He deserved it. Sarah waited in the upstairs hallway outside the children's rooms. She had changed into soft pajamas. Elena had laid out pale gray cotton that hung loose on her thin frame, but she had not slept. Her hair was still damp from a quick shower. Dark circles carved deeper hollows beneath her eyes. When she saw Vincent approaching, she stepped forward instinctively, then stopped, fear flashing across her face at the fresh blood seeping through his shirt. You're bleeding again. He shook his head once, small, weary. It's nothing. It's never nothing. Her voice trembled, soft, timid, but edged with something fiercer now. She reached out, fingers brushing the stained fabric. Let me look. Vincent caught her wrist gently. Later. We need to talk first. She searched his face, confusion, anxiety, the old guardedness flickering back. About Marco, about everything. He led her to the small library at the end of the hall, the one with the single leather armchair and floor-to-ceiling shelves that smelled of old paper and wax polish. A single lamp burned low. Vincent closed the door behind them. Sarah stood near the window, arms wrapped around herself. Outside, security lights swept slow arcs across the lawn. Tell me. Vincent remained by the door distance, deliberate, as though he feared contaminating her with what he carried. Marco confessed. He didn't just leak Luca's location once. He's been feeding information for months, small things at first testing, then bigger. He told Reyes where you were living before I found you. He knew the exact night the eviction happened. He knew you were sleeping in your car with Luca that winter. Sarah's knees buckled. She caught herself against the windowsill. Dizziness hit her in a violent wave room, tilting breath shallow. He knew I was there, with Luca, and he did nothing. Vincent's voice cracked. He did worse. He made sure the landlord pushed harder, made sure the shelter turned you away that night. He wanted you desperate. He thought if you stayed broken, I'd never bring you here. Never change. Tears spilled down Sarah's cheeks, silent at first, then wrenching. She slid to the floor, back against the wall, knees drawn up. All those nights. The cold. The hunger. Luca crying because he was scared. It wasn't just bad luck. Someone made it happen. Vincent knelt before her, slow, careful of his side. He did not touch her yet. I should have seen it. I should have protected you both long before I knew your names. She looked at him, eyes wide with shock, horror, betrayal so deep it numbed her. You didn't know. I should have. Remorse tore through him, violent, consuming, leaving nothing untouched. Every choice I made built the world that hurt you. I told myself power kept people safe. I was wrong. Sarah reached out, trembling, and cupped his face. Her palms were cold, her touch gentle. You're here now. Vincent closed his eyes against the tears that threatened. I don't deserve that forgiveness. You're earning it, she whispered. A sudden, sharp crack split the night glass, shattering downstairs. Vincent surged to his feet, pulling Sarah up with him. Stay behind me. He moved to the door, cracked it open. Footsteps, multiple, hurried, echoed from the foyer. Voices, low, urgent, unfamiliar. Reyes's crew. Again. Vincent turned to Sarah. Safe room. Now. She shook her head. Not without you, Sarah. But the argument died as gunfire erupted. Controlled bursts, not wild. Vincent's men responded instantly. Chaos bloomed below. Vincent pulled Sarah into the hallway. We get the children first. They ran Vincent, limping Sarah close behind. In the playroom, Luca and Sophia were already awake, eyes huge, clutching blankets. Elena stood in the doorway, face pale but steady. Take them, Vincent ordered. Safe room. Lock it. Elena nodded, gathering the children. But as they turned the corner, a figure stepped from the shadows, black tactical gear rifle raised. Reyes. He smiled, thin, victorious. You're predictable, Russo. Vincent shoved Sarah behind him. Let them go. This is between us. Reyes laughed once. No, it's about ending weakness. Starting with the boy. He shifted aim toward the children. Time slowed. Sarah screamed raw primal and lunged forward, throwing herself between Reyes and Luca. The shot cracked, sharp, deafening. She staggered. Red bloomed across her chest, dark spreading fast. She dropped to her knees, hands pressing the wound, eyes wide with shock. Vincent roared, a sound torn from his core, and closed the distance in a single desperate surge. He disarmed Reyes with brutal efficiency, slamming him against the wall. Vincent's men swarmed in seconds later, securing the intruder. But Vincent saw none of it. He dropped beside Sarah, hands covering hers over the wound. Blood seeped between their fingers, warm, relentless. No, Sarah looked up at him, eyes glassy, breath shallow. Luca, Sophia, they're safe. Vincent's voice broke. They're safe. She managed a faint smile, trembling brave. You kept them safe. Tears streamed down Vincent's face, hot, unchecked. Stay with me, please. Elena rushed forward with towels, pressing them against the wound. Hold pressure. Hard. Sarah's hand found Vincent's cheek, weak, cold. I never thought anyone would care enough to fight for us. Vincent pressed his forehead to hers. I care. God, I care so much. Her eyes fluttered. Tell them. I love them. You'll tell them yourself. His voice cracked, desperate. You have to. She shook her head, small, fading. Promise me. You'll keep them. Raise them. Love them. Vincent sobbed, once raw. I promise. Her hand slipped from his cheek. Her eyes closed. Vincent held her, rocking gently, blood soaking his sweater, his hands, the carpet. Remorse, guilt, love crashed together in a storm so violent it left him numb. He had failed again. He had brought her here to save her, and she had died saving them. But then faint, her chest rose. Shallow, irregular, but rising. Elena pressed harder. She's still with us. We need to move her now. Vincent lifted Sarah in his arms, careful, reverent, ignoring the fire in his side. He carried her downstairs through the chaos of secured intruders and flashing lights to the waiting ambulance his men had summoned despite protocol. In the back of the vehicle, he held her hand as paramedics worked oxygen mask IV lines, urgent voices. Sarah's eyes opened, once briefly finding his. Stay, she whispered, barely audible. Vincent leaned close. I'm not going anywhere. The doors closed. Sirens wailed. The ambulance sped into the night. Vincent sat beside her, bloodied, broken, but unyielding. Inside him, the conflict reached its zenith guilt. For every moment he had not protected her sooner, terror that he might lose her now, and a love so fierce, so absolute it burned away every doubt. He would not let her go, not tonight, not ever. In the quiet between heartbeats, as the city lights streaked past, Vincent whispered against her hair, I love you, as family, as home, as everything I never knew I needed. And somewhere in the haze of pain and morphine, Sarah's fingers tightened once around his. The night stretched on. Chicago waited, but hope, fragile, stubborn, held. The hospital room on the upper floor of Northwestern Memorial carried the quiet hush of early morning October 31st, 2025. Pale sunlight slipped between half-closed blinds, painting thin gold stripes across white sheets and the polished floor. Machines beeped in soft, steady rhythm, heart monitor oxygen flow, intravenous drip sounds that had become the background music of survival. Sarah lay in the center of the bed, small against the expanse of crisp linen. Bandages covered her chest and shoulder. An oxygen cannula rested beneath her nose. Color had begun to return to her cheeks, slowly, stubbornly, but her hands still looked fragile, thin fingers resting motionless on the blanket. She had come so close to leaving. The bullet had torn through muscle and grazed lung. Surgeons had worked for 6 hours to stop the bleeding, repair what was torn, give her body time to remember how to fight. Vincent sat in the upholstered chair beside her, elbows on his knees, hands clasped so tightly the knuckles stood white. He had not left the room except for brief moments when nurses insisted he step out. His own wound had been restitched. Fresh bandages showed beneath his open shirt collar. Exhaustion carved deep lines around his eyes, yet he refused to close them. Every time her breathing changed even slightly, he leaned closer, listening, waiting, willing her to stay. Luca and Sophia slept on the pull-out sofa near the window. Elena had brought blankets from home, soft, familiar ones that smelled faintly of cinnamon and laundry soap. The children had cried themselves to sleep hours earlier, small hands clutching each other. Now their breathing rose and fell, in quiet unison, faces slack with the deep rest only children can find after terror. Vincent watched them a long moment. Then his gaze returned to Sarah. She stirred, small, almost imperceptible. Her eyelids fluttered, opened. Vincent leaned forward instantly. "Hey." Her lips moved dry, cracked. "Luca, Sophia. They're right here. Safe." He reached for the cup of ice chips on the bedside table, slipped one between her lips. Easy. Small sips. She let the ice melt, eyes searching his face. "You're still here. Where else would I be?" Tears welled in her eyes, slow, silent. When the shot came, I thought that was it." Vincent's throat closed. He took her hand, careful, reverent, and pressed it to his cheek. "You saved them. You stepped in front of my son. I will never forget that." Sarah's fingers curled weakly against his stubble. "I only did what any mother would do. You did more." His voice cracked. "You showed me what family really means. Not blood, not power, choice, protection. Love without conditions." She managed the faintest smile. "You gave me that first. When you came to that awful apartment, when you carried me out of the cold, when you let me hold my boy again, I was nothing, thin, hungry, shaking from nights of wind and no sleep. I smelled like the street. I had nothing to offer. And you still saw me." Vincent bowed his head. Tears slipped free, quiet, unstoppable. "I saw a woman who fought every day to keep her child alive, who walked miles in snow with holes in her shoes, who slept under bridges so she could stay close to the building that held her son. I saw strength I never had the courage to recognize in myself." Sarah exhaled, shaky. "We're so different. You in your big house with marble floors and security gates. Me, nothing but a backpack and cardboard for a bed. And yet here we are," he whispered. "Together." Luca stirred, then small sound of waking. He sat up, rubbing his eyes. Mom Sarah turned her head slowly. "Hey, baby." Luca scrambled off the sofa, Sophia right behind him. They climbed onto the bed, careful, gentle, pressing against her uninjured side. Sarah wrapped her good arm around them, both tears falling into their hair. Vincent watched chest so tight he could barely breathe. Remorse still lived there gnawing, but it no longer ruled alone. Gratitude burned brighter now. Awe, a fierce, protective love that felt like fire in his veins. He spoke quietly, voice thick. "I'm stepping away from the old life. The empire, the deals, the fear. I'm selling what I can. Moving what's left into legitimate channels. Real estate, charities, things that build instead of destroy." Sarah looked at him, eyes wide. "You don't have to, I do." He met her gaze. "For Luca, for Sophia, for you. I want them to grow up knowing safety isn't bought with guns. It's built with trust, with love, with showing up every day no matter what." Luca lifted his head. "Does that mean—" "We stay together," Vincent reached out, slow cupping the back of Luca's neck. "If your mom says yes, we stay together. All of us. As family." Sophia's small hand found Vincent's. "Uncle Vinny," he smiled through tears. "Yeah, sweetheart, I like that plan." Sarah laughed, weak, breathless, but real. Then it settled. Vincent leaned forward, pressing his lips to Sarah's forehead, gentle, lingering. "I love you," he whispered, "not because of what you can give, because of who you are. The woman who taught me compassion is stronger than any empire I ever built." Sarah's tears fell anew. "And I love you. For seeing me when I was invisible, for giving me back my son, for giving us all a future." The room held them in quiet stillness, machines, beeping softly, children breathing evenly, sunlight warming skin that had once known only cold. Outside, Chicago moved on, indifferent, relentless. Inside, love had rewritten every rule. Weeks passed. Sarah grew stronger, slowly, steadily. Physical therapy in the hospital gym. Walks down quiet corridors with Vincent's arm steady around her waist. Luca and Sophia brought drawings every day, houses with 4 stick figures holding hands beneath bright skies. When discharge day arrived, Vincent drove them home himself. No convoy, no tinted windows. Just an ordinary black SUV, soft music on the radio, children chattering in the back seat. The mansion gates opened without fanfare. Inside, Elena waited with fresh linens and a pot of soup simmering on the stove. She hugged Sarah carefully, long wordless. Then she hugged Vincent too. "You did it," she murmured. "We did it," he corrected. That evening they gathered in the living room, fire-crackling blankets draped over laps. Vincent sat between Luca and Sophia. Sarah leaned against his shoulder. No cameras watched them now. Vincent had ordered them removed, every lens, every feed. What happened here belonged to them alone. Sarah looked around at the warm room, at the children, drawing quietly at the man who had once terrified her and now felt like home. "Knowledge matters," she said softly. "Knowledge of pain teaches empathy. Knowledge of loss teaches gratitude. Knowledge of kindness teaches us to give it freely." Vincent nodded. "And every lesson we live through becomes education, not just for us, but for the people we touch. Lesson after lesson builds compassion. Education in forgiveness changes everything." Sarah smiled. "More knowledge leads to deeper understanding. More lesson leads to wiser hearts. More education opens doors we never knew existed." Vincent squeezed her hand. "Knowledge reminds us no one is invisible. Lesson shows us love crosses every divide, skin color, wealth, poverty. Education proves compassion is the only currency that never runs out." Sarah rested her head on his shoulder. "And love, real love, doesn't see color or bank accounts. It sees people. Hurting people. Hopeful people. People worth protecting." Vincent kissed her temple. "We learned that together." Outside, the city lights glittered cold, distant. Inside, warmth held them close. To everyone watching this video, I wish you good health, a joyful life, and daily peace. If this story touched you, please subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it so more people can experience these heartfelt moments every day. We upload engaging stories regularly. Come back and join us. How did this story make you feel? Does it remind you of anything in your own life? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every one and truly want to hear the emotions from deep within your hearts. Thank you for being here. Goodbye for now. And I promise I'll see you again in the next video. Disclaimer. All stories on this channel are fictional and created solely for entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to real people, events, or places is purely coincidental.